Chapter 13: The Role of the Turnaround Leader. Many turnaround situations involve a leader who is exhibiting a behavior that creates a wall between the company and progress, frustrating any activities that might correct the company's path and bring about growth. Whether you are that leader, or an investor, board member, or other conservator, you must realize that turnaround begins at the top. A look at the leader. 5 impediments to turnaround and growth. Number 1, pride. Unhealthy levels of pride contribute to a leader's failure to give credit to others when appropriate, or to an unwillingness to listen to customers, employees, or others when their input would help the business. Pride can manifest itself as an inability to share even an emotional ownership of ideas or of the company's success with others. Pride can also cause the not invented here syndrome with a top leader. It is an inebriant causing the delusion that the best solutions will only come from that leader him or herself, or within his or her own company or industry. Pride also prevents one from admitting that he or she is in any way a contributor to any problem, and is one of the most common killers of great companies and inhibitors of growth. Possible solutions? Most everyone has a few people in their lives with whom they place great trust and respect. Whether it is a mentor, family member, especially a parent, spouse, or spiritual authority, a trusted relationship might be the best connection to transform the heart of someone who is blinded with pride. Investors and other stakeholders who may have enough rapport with the leader could also be a possible door to the intervention. The bottom line here is that an intervention should involve clear, incontrovertible facts and multiple examples of the leader's pride getting in the way of not just serving the customer's best interests, but also hindering growth, profitability, and even the leader's own wealth. The leader's self-interest may be the quickest way to get him or her to realize the cost of his or her pride. 2. Abusive relationships. Abuse often occurs through inappropriate sexual relationships at the top that may or may not be with consenting subordinates. The distrust and rancor that results can ripple much further than most would imagine. Another example of abuse is displaying behaviors intended to demean or control others. This manifests itself in a lack of respect for a certain facet of the company, level or skill or talent, personality type, communication style, or worse, a person's background, origin, or personal beliefs. Possible solutions? Many of these abuse issues could be directed through human resources if the department or person handling such a role has the gravitas. Most people in our culture have enough sense of integrity that if confronted one-on-one, they would admit that actions showing this kind of disrespect are wrong. Sexual relationships occurring at the top will require the proper higher authority, if there is one, to become involved. Also, managers who are prized and respected by the leader may be able to start a white-collar strike to show that they cannot stand by and allow such abuse to continue. 3. Gossiping. Backbiting, backstabbing, bad-mouthing, and repeating any report that is not positive about others to those who have no responsibility in the matter is poison. Even when a bad report is 100% factual, it is still gossip. Gossip has brought down many a reputation and company, both of which could have been repaired and lives and jobs saved had the gossiper followed a more healing path. Possible solutions? Gossip is so common that I have often seen it successfully rooted out through the effective use of the values clarification and reinforcement process outlined in Chapter 2. One former CEO of a Fortune 500 company would literally walk away from any conversation in which a bad report was being given. Word spread throughout the entire company with tens of thousands of employees, and soon gossip became virtually absent and the company thrived. Later, a CEO of different colors came in, and not only did a different type of competition come into play, but the culture turned as well. Some said it was the lack of the good report culture that was the greater contributor to the company's demise. New leadership has started to bring the company back, but they had a long fall. The point is that you as a leader, regardless of your position, can transform the culture of backstabbing by refusing to participate. I know of another company that wrote into their mission statement and vision that the purpose was to improve the character of the employees and customers, not to make a profit. When they fired a highly productive older woman for gossip, the state Supreme Court held up the dismissal. Number 4, greed. Greed can be displayed through unfair pay that is either too high or too low. Right now, corporate America is paying the price for undeserved bonuses and unusually high salaries. And I will not debate the right levels of such for a publicly held company, as that is a job for the stakeholders. In the vast majority of privately held companies, greed at the top often becomes obvious to the employees, and growth is constrained as a result. Possible solutions? The stakeholders of a privately held company are free to leave and must make the effort to leave if pay is grossly unfair in any direction. Confronting the leader about the impact his or her greed is having, not just on the morale, but also on the productivity and thus profits, should surely begin to wake him or her up. Number 5, any of these 5 dysfunctions in the principle of authority. Number 1, lack of clear authority structure. When a chain of command is not clearly defined, chaos, dysfunction, and frustration will ultimately ensue. This dysfunction is most frequently displayed in partnerships, whether 50-50 or some other split of authority. Eventually, there will be decisions that can't be made, resulting in stress and arguments. Frustrations or jealousies due to unequal workloads or pay can also crop up in such partnership situations. Possible solutions? A clear titular authority, tiebreaker, or third-party advisory role can eliminate the dysfunction in decision-making and leadership. Whereas I prefer organic organizational charts that are in the shapes of circles or mind maps because I've seen how they reduce the stuffiness of authority structures, there must be some chain of command and accountability. Despite any distaste you may have for org charts, you need one. So consider the alternative shapes. 2, the lack of respect for the chain of command. When you have subordinates who disrespect the chain of command, they create conflict. The same goes for titular leaders who don't differentiate between the open door of communication and the proper channels of appeal. Possible solution. You may need to set a value or standard that reinforces the proper respect of the chain of command, but be careful not to squelch open communication. Number 3, the inability to communicate up the ladder without fear of retribution, with legitimate appeals and a clear appeal process. One of the quickest ways to shut down communication and growth is to allow managers to get away with punishing subordinates who have made legitimate appeals or efforts to communicate appropriate matters up the chain of command. A company, like a government, does well to have a healthy process of appeal, without which bitterness and resentment will quickly grow and choke your employees' commitment and productivity. Possible solutions? There are 2 key principles here that, if put in place, can do much to improve communication, innovation, and growth, as well as reduce conflict and inappropriate behaviors. First, you as a leader must instill the value of trust in oneself, first by your own example, so that managers are not so overly protective of their own back that they become embittered by any confrontations from subordinates, which will inevitably come their way. Second, you must teach others to trust in the authority structure and process of management and appeals. Most people don't understand the appeal process in life or business, but it works much like our court system. There is always a higher authority to whom you can appeal. But appeals must be made in a humble and respectful way. There are even Fortune 500 companies with appeal processes that allow employees to appeal all of the way up to the CEO. They are well managed, don't take that much of the CEO's time, and are transformational at building morale and trust in the leadership. Number 4, the lack of checks and balances. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. A titular leader with no checks and balance is bound to get into situations in which the lack thereof will stagnate growth in the team. Regardless of your integrity, if you are the top leader without a check on your actions, with every conflict in which you become engaged, despite your belief that all has been resolved, opinions will often fester unresolved in the heart of those who feel wronged. These offenses will inevitably affect employees and thus productivity, growth, and profit. You must instill checks and balances with your power to prevent this now and in the future when your succession plan takes hold. Possible solutions: I'm amazed at how many boards have no concept of their authority and role. Board incompetence is mainly the fault of the titular leader. As such, you must ensure that the best practices in board governance are regularly reviewed and agreed upon. If you lack a true and independent board, create one, or at least a board of advisors. Tell your team that you submit to the authority of the board in matters relevant to their authority, and that the board is a safety valve for the whole company. Number 5, megalomania and rebellion. This can be displayed through the titular leader, whether it's a president that's an employee or an owner. Any leader who refuses to submit to the higher authority of either a board of directors or advisors or the customer in appropriate matters will eventually endanger the existence of the organization. You can debate which areas may or may not be appropriate for the titular leader to submit to the input or directive of the customers or a board, even if he appointed that board. But the main concern is whether or not that titular and seemingly autonomous leader is willing to submit to anyone on anything. The will to submit to correction is usually there or not. Either the person tends to exhibit some signs of megalomania and general rebellion against other authorities, or that leader has some sense of true humility and thus is coachable and able to be a part of a turnaround when and if one is needed. There is no middle ground on this issue. The clear solution is that as a leader, you must show that you are truly willing to submit to some higher authority on at least some issues. This topic segues into the sire of all leadership virtue, humility. Humility, the sire of all virtue. There was a product manager at a large consumer products company who was forced to work with a haughty executive who was wont to wear his degrees on his sleeve. With his JD and MBA, along with 2 undergraduate degrees, he was quick to say, "Oh, I have a degree in this. Oh, I have a degree in that," and irritate the sense out of his coworkers. One day, in reviewing a problem, he said to the product manager, "I have a degree in this area," and the product manager interrupted and said, "Even thermometers have degrees, and you know where people stick thermometers." She was able to say this in a way that even he laughed. She had a gift with communication as well as a level of humility that this well-degreed executive did not. There is no virtue in leadership as important to accelerated growth and turnaround as that of humility. Not so much because mistakes must be admitted, but because the source of the solutions will come from without, not within. Your personal education and experience are probably not the key sources of the solutions that will be needed. The strength of the relationships you have and the process for synergizing those relationships, internal and external to your organization, will be the source of many ideas that will be the steps to your growth and turnaround. A best practice to show and prove your humility is to have confidential blind spot sessions. This is the simple but potentially painful practice of inviting your team, one by one, to meet with you, share your greatest blind spots that most hinder you and your company's growth. They are to point out your character missteps with specific examples, and if they wish, discuss how it might have impacted others. When you as a leader can listen to, understand, acknowledge, and respond to the weaknesses that your subordinates bring to you in this setting, it will do more to bond your relationships and tap the full potential of your people than many a management tactic. These confidential blind spot sessions are much more than the question we read about in the Role Focus 12, which was, what are the things that my superior does that most hinder me? Your people will bring up your character flaws and habits that may seem unrelated to your effectiveness, but they will bring them up for a reason. They will test you with smaller issues to see how you react, and if you take notes, confirm what you've heard and whether or not you will make excuses for the examples or acknowledge them and ask for help in keeping you accountable to better character in the future. You will see people transform before your eyes. This one practice alone has saved bankrupt companies. Turning around a company is first about turning around the people, and the first turnaround is you. Key actions of a true turnaround leader. Uncover relationship opportunities. In larger organizations, you may not be able to meet or call to interview enough people in enough facets for the limited amount of time you may have in a turnaround. Still, one-on-one, face-to-face depth interviews will be your most effective means for gleaning the insights you need. With time and travel constraints, pack your calendar with phone interviews and consider using an objective third party to flesh out additional interviews as needed. If you are new to the organization, you don't have much time for the assessment phase, but you also can't begin to pull certain triggers prematurely. There will probably be skeletons to uncover, and many people won't be overly excited to point them out. Beyond assessing opportunities, more important is building relationships with those on your team whom you are there to serve. A top priority in a turnaround is to understand the personal objectives as clearly as you understand the organization's. In buyouts and takeovers, the acquirers often parachute in and begin boasting of an aggressive vision for growth and the strategy, health, and successes of the acquiring company. These are not the first things that employees at a newly purchased company want to hear. The first questions they have are, do I have a job here? Are we relocating to another city? Will my compensation change? Will I keep the same health care benefits? Will I have the same parking spot? How am I valued by this new ownership? Focus on your people first, their questions, needs, and objectives. Let them know you will help them get what they need and want, and they will help you get what you need and want. Change symbols as well as your actions. If you have been at your company for a while and have decided to take on the turnaround mindset, consider changing your title. For example, some leaders who succeeded at making the right impressions and turn things around changed their titles from CEO to CIO for Chief Innovation Officer, or ICEO for Interim CEO, CGO for Chief Growth Officer, or Adjunct COO for or Adjunct VP of Operations for Part-Time Operations Officer. On rare occasions, I have heard people actually use the title Turnaround CEO or Turnaround VP. Such changes could even be physical, such as locating a CEO's office in the middle of everything rather than at some far-flung corner office. Putting in glass walls around a leader's office has also been a powerful symbol. I've seen leaders even take their door off its hinges to impress that the door is literally always open. Private rooms are probably available down the hall, so why not make the point? Drastic times call for drastic measures. Prioritize action. Go through this book and rate the potential impact each suggestion could have in your company and prioritize ideas for action. This will help to build the beginnings of a plan that can help to grow your business. You also need the right people for all the growth efforts to be successful, their buy-in and engagement. We suggest that you share copies of Growth or Bust and discuss your highlights from it with all members of your team and ask for their feedback on what they see to be the priorities for growth and top strategies to implement. This, combined with our resources available at echelonmanagement.com, can help you to begin an ongoing process of optimizing growth. Reach out for help. If you've been at your company for a while and you know that the bar can be raised, consider consulting with a third party. Despite the fact that you know your business and you may have decades of successful experience at growing business, a third-party consultant focused on growth may have faced the same problems hundreds of times to your 10. And when an engagement is positioned properly on the right objectives, just one profitable idea or new direction or strategy can make it worth it. And finally, the call of the leader. Whether you are in a struggle for your company's life or you just want to accelerate growth of an already very successful company, you have a responsibility to the families that depend on your company. The most important customer might not be the one paying the bills or even the employees, but the children, the extended family, and the community that depends on your company, that depend on you to focus on facilitating innovation and growth. Truly, it is growth or bust. Their lives depend on it. Carpe diem.